All right. Hello, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about the inner critic and how the inner critic is really just there trying to help you. And we're going to be talking about how self-love can trigger an abandonment wound that a lot of us maybe aren't aware that we have, and how we can work with that trigger by becoming aware of it and making room for it and doing what we do, and that abandonment wound trigger with the self-love is completely tied into our inner critic and the kind of journey we're all going to go on with our inner critic that, again, is just trying to help us. So to get started, I want to read a question that I got on Instagram that sort of I've been wanting to talk about the inner critic and talk about this shame voice that we all have. The inner critic, the shame voice, the guilt voice, that voice that tells us that we're not good enough, that we're doing everything wrong, that we should be doing this or that. And even it's that critical, negative, I can't love myself, I can't love this part of myself, I can't accept this part of myself, I have to be mean to me, voice in there that feels really correct, all right? And then we all have the inner critic that we know, like, we nitpick our bodies, or we nitpick how we look, or we nitpick our clothes, or kind of like superficial things. And we can all say, right, okay, that inner critic we could do away with. But there's often the deeper inner critic that we defend, and we don't really actually want to. It would even feel wrong or bad to try to not engage or not listen to other parts of our inner critic, right? Like, we all have that inner critic that tells us we're not doing good enough in our career, or if we keep being this way, no one is ever going to love us, and if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to end up homeless on the street, or not have enough food, or not have enough money, and that there really actually is something wrong with us that is inherently bad and is going to hurt other people, or is hurting other people, or is going to hurt ourselves. Like, if we have an addiction or a coping mechanism or a self-sabotaging behavior that's objectively causing harm on some level, it's normal and it's natural to say, I have to hate this part of myself. I have to not like this part of myself. Like, it would be dangerous, it would be wrong, it would be incorrect to love this part of myself and to accept this part of myself, because it's causing harm, it's causing damage. And so there's that side of it too, of that we all have our inner critic that we know, okay, like, I could be nicer to myself, whatever. But then when we start to get deeper into it, and we start to really start looking at our shame and our guilt and the things that we don't like about ourselves and the things that we criticize ourselves for, we often are like, well, yeah, like, that's a very legitimate thing to criticize. That's a very legitimate thing to think is wrong and bad, because look at results. And so I've been wanting to talk about this and kind of explain what's going on. And then I posted on Instagram a few days ago just something about inner dialogue and being nice to ourselves when we're talking to ourselves, and learning to be kind to ourselves in our own heads, and assume innocence, and assume that we're not just hurting ourselves on purpose, or assume that we're not just messing up our lives on purpose. And I got the question, and I'm just going to paraphrase, I'm not going to read it, because just in case someone doesn't want their details shared. But basically somebody was saying that, like, they have a friend who's very depressed, and that they find it almost impossible to say something nice to themselves. And that it's not even that they're not trying. It's not that they're not wanting to be nice to themselves. It's not that they're not attempting to be nice to themselves. It's that anytime they try, anytime they go for it, it's completely impossible, right? And she was asking if there's some other work that needs to be done first before we're even going to be able to be nice to ourselves on the inside before we're even going to be able to move towards being able to meet that inner critic with, okay, I hear you, I see why you're wanting to beat me up about this or whatever, but I'm going to say something nice about myself. I'm going to say something nice to myself. And my answer for that is that we first need to understand what the inner critic is, why we have such a hard time being nice to ourselves, and again, the abandonment wound that can be being triggered by this, so that we can move forward, okay? So the anatomy of the inner critic, or the genesis of the inner critic, is essentially this. When we were growing up, in our early developmental times, yes, we all remember this, we were fully and completely dependent upon our caregivers for absolutely everything, okay? And again, we have to take into account how incredibly profound that is. We all, like, I understand that inner child work and the inner child and what happened in our childhood and childhood trauma stuff is like all the rage right now, and it can start to just feel like noise. And I just want to take a minute and just be like, no, we need to really back up, and we need to really anchor in the profundity of this concept, that when our nervous systems were being programmed for what equals survival, what we have to do and be in order to survive this life, our nervous systems were being programmed. So not even our conscious minds, not even the conscious conditioning or the unconscious conditioning. We're talking our physical bodies, our actual nervous system, our wiring, got programmed with basic rules that were given to us by our caregivers, by the people who were the authority figures in our early life, that said, this is the way you have to be, and these are the ways you cannot be in order to be accepted. And we have to really take into account that acceptance in our childhoods equaled survival. Okay? Why are we also addicted to external love? Why are we also addicted to being accepted? Because when our nervous systems were being programmed from 0 to 7, when we did not have the capacity to provide for ourselves, when we did not have the capacity to understand ourselves, when we could not get ourselves out of pain or into pleasure or get our needs met or even understand what our needs were or communicate them or anything, everything was dependent upon, do these people love me? Because they hold the keys to everything I need to survive. So my one way of ensuring my own survival, my one way of ensuring my own safety, my one way of ensuring that I am going to get to continue to live, all comes down to how acceptable I can make myself. Okay? We couldn't go, oh, my caregivers aren't giving me food or aren't giving me the right food or aren't giving me attention or aren't giving me whatever it is that I need. I can just go get it somewhere else. I can go figure something else out. I can go to my uncle. I can go to my aunt. We didn't have that. We didn't even have the understanding of what we needed. We didn't have the understanding of why we were in pain or how to get out of pain. Okay? All we knew was these people, depending on how much they accept me and understand me, is the exact degree to which I get my needs met or that I don't. That I have pleasure or that I have pain. Okay? That was what was wired into you from the very beginning. Before you had a conscious mind that could tell stories. Before you had conscious awareness that could understand what was happening to you. This wasn't even programming your thoughts yet. This was programming your body, the nervous system. Okay? So please understand that this cannot be overemphasized. That this nervous system programming what was programmed into you in your early childhood is still probably running the show in your life. Because again, it's not even a conscious thing. It was how it was from the very beginning of your life. It's the water you've been swimming in your entire life that shaped your beliefs, that shaped your perceptions, that then all of the false or true beliefs you have about yourself and reality, all the rules of who and what you have to be, who and what you cannot be, what you can do, what you can't do, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, the things that bring you shame and guilt, the things that bring you pride, that all formed on top of this base. These are the things that get me accepted. These are the things that get me rejected. And we have to understand that in our infancy and in our childhood, the parts of ourselves that got us rejected by our caregivers were an existential threat to us. Do we understand this? Why do you have parts of yourself that you hate? Why do you have parts of yourself that you fear? Why do you have parts of yourself that you absolutely cannot accept and cannot say something nice to? Because from the very beginning of your life, you learned that these parts equal I don't get my needs met. I get rejected, I get abandoned, I get subtly let down. It may not have even been that you were like outwardly neglected. It could be if these parts caused your caregivers to energetically pull away from you, to abandon you, to reject you, to shame you, to pull away from you. I'm not going to meet your need. You wired in, this part of me is going to get me killed. This part of me is the reason I'm not getting my needs met. Because you are still a biological organism that wants to live. Okay, you are still a biological organism that wants to live. And anything that threatens your survival on a nervous system level, especially in the beginning of your life, gets programmed in as this is an existential threat to me. So even if that was you were an extrovert and you were loud and your parents were introverts and they withdrew from you being loud, you are now going to have an uncomfortable, at best, relationship with your extroversion because it was an existential threat to you in your childhood when it made your caregivers recoil from you, your caregivers who you relied upon for absolutely everything, recoil from you, okay? And then for most of us, it was much less subtle than that. We grew up and we started getting yelled at for our behaviors. We started getting shamed. We started getting punished. We started getting things taken away. We started getting like truly abandoned, told to our face, you cannot be this way, you cannot do this, this is not okay. And then on the other side, being programmed that you have to be this way. This is what success is. This is what good is. This is what right is. This is what is approvable. And so we started to have this complete mess inside of our natural selves wanting to grow, wanting to express, wanting to make mistakes, wanting to do whatever they wanted to do, not being able to because they were being rejected. We were getting yelled at for spilling the water. We were getting yelled at for making the mess. We were getting yelled at instead of helped, instead of, okay, I can see you didn't mean to make a mess today and I'm busy and I don't have time. Right? Most of us just got yelled at. Most of us just got adult consciousness projected onto us. You're just being difficult. You're being manipulative. You're making a mess on purpose. You knew better and you didn't do better. You could have done better and you didn't when really we were just learning. Right? So now we're having all of these parts of self that are just trying to grow. that are just trying to express, that are just trying to be themselves. So either just trying to develop as a normal person would develop, or that are true and authentic to us, that are getting us rejected. And then we have other parts that we aren't. We're not extroverted, say. We're not scientifically minded. We're not geared towards whatever thing we're being conditioned we have to be from our caregivers and their conditioning and their conditioning and their conditioning and society at large, for this is what a good human is. And then all the parts of ourselves that don't fit that, we now have an existential threat that we can't do it, we can't be it, we're going to try as hard as we can, and every time we fail, that part of us that sabotages or is simply incapable of living up to societal standards is again a part of ourselves we're going to hate. And we're not going to see in so many ways that there are other ways of being, because this is what the inner critic is trying to do. Okay? The inner critic is trying to make you the person your caregivers programmed you to, that you had to be in your infancy to get love and approval. So the degree to which you hate yourself, the degree to which you have that inner critic that is constantly telling you this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is the degree to which your true authentic self either didn't get to go on its learning path because it was rejected, abandoned, shamed, didn't get explained when it was trying to grow, or that doesn't align with the programming that you were given, especially from 0 to 7, about what is the right way to be in the world. And this can even have happened to you later in life, like when you were graduating high school or starting to go out on your own and life stopped being so programmed, right? Because especially when we're in school and in university and all this stuff, it's like step by step by step, and then you get launched into the real world and you have no idea what you're doing and you have no idea what you want to do or what makes you happy or whatever, because the thing that was giving you security before was just the fact that you were doing the program. And then when the program goes away, or you get to a point where you literally can't do the program anymore, right? You can't force yourself to do the 9 to 5. You can't force yourself to find the person and get married and have the 2.5 kids with the white picket fence. You can't do it. You're going to hate that part of yourself. Okay, so again, we have to understand what the inner critic is doing. The inner critic is the nervous system programmed part of you that said, these are the rules we were handed from the very beginning of our lives about who and what we have to be and who and what we cannot be in order to be accepted, in order to be loved. Because to our nervous systems, to be rejected and to not be loved equals death. Okay, again, this cannot be overstated. It's not something you think about. Of course, now in your adulthood, you could say, yeah, I guess I could reasonably not do this job. And maybe I disappoint my parents, but who cares? Your nervous system really cares. Your body is like, no, we can't do that. We'll die. It doesn't matter how mature your head is. It doesn't matter how much you can logic your way into, like, okay, yeah, sure, I could be an extrovert. It annoyed my caregivers that I was loud, but I'm an adult now. I'm going to be loud. And then you go and try and do that, and you're going to feel like you're going to die. You're going to literally feel like someone is going to come and yell at you or take something away from you that you love, or like you're not going to be okay. You are most likely going to be in a state where you don't even recognize that you could question that some of these parts of yourself might be totally fine. Like it might be okay to be an extrovert. Because in your head, extrovert now means attention-seeking, it means obnoxious, it means ugly, it means bad. Like it will have been cast into the shadow now. And it's going to come out in unhealthy ways. And you're going to have only evidence for how this part of you is bad, because this is the next thing, right? So the inner critic is trying to control you to make you who your caregivers wanted you to be, everything you were trying to do, and the degree to which that's different from who you really are. Okay, so all of the parts of you that are actually authentic to you, every part of you that you actually are, and everything that you actually aren't, didn't change. So now, your needs as an authentic person to be, say, like I said, an extrovert, because you couldn't healthfully develop that, it doesn't mean you became an introvert and you just are good at it now. No. What would have happened is that extroverted part of you would have been continually shamed and blamed and called obnoxious, called too loud, too much, too attention seeking, da 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 da. And you would have just learned that this part of you is just bad, bad, bad. So every time you express, every time you do whatever you're doing and it's extroverted, you're gonna automatically, before you even think about it, have shame and guilt, and you're gonna try and shut that part of yourself down. And you're gonna have all these stories and all these reasons for like, look, everyone hates it. Because this is gonna be the other thing. The relationships that you're gonna be attracted to, the people that you're gonna be around are most likely going to be similar to your caregivers because that's familiar to your nervous system. You are going to continually be attracted to people and places and things that are like your conditioning because that's what your nervous system is used to. That's what your nervous system is comfortable with. Because we are biological beings, we are constantly seeking homeostasis, a predictable environment. So even if that environment is predictably bad, predictably uncomfortable, predictably not fun, it's safe to the nervous system. So you're going to have, again, all of this evidence for how people don't like this about you. Because now you're only friends with introverts. Maybe you went into like an academic field and like everyone you know and everyone that you're around are introverts. And so this extroverted part of you is unliked by them too. And it continues to reinforce over and over and over again, no, this is a bad part. See, every time I'm extroverted, I lose friends, I lose colleagues, people don't like it, I'm obnoxious. Because you couldn't even find in your current reality people who love you for being loud because you wouldn't feel comfortable relating with them because they're different than your programming. So again, you're continually inner criticking these parts of yourself that you learned so early in your life that these are the rules. And then you are attracted to people who follow those same rules in your adulthood, because that's homeostasis. So now it's just reinforced over and over and over again that these parts of you are bad. So then you're going to work to suppress them, and that's where coping mechanisms and self-sabotage and addictions come from, right? We're trying to get rid of these parts of ourselves that are just natural to us, or we're addicted because the only time we let our extroversion out is when we're drunk, is when we're high, is when we're partying. And so we can't stop ourselves because this is like a natural part of who we are, and we don't have a healthy way of expressing it. We're only able to express it in shadowed ways because we hate it so much, because it's such an existential threat to us. We never learned how to love it. We never learned how to support it. We never learned how to make it safe that we are that way, because our nervous systems are programmed so hardcore that this is an existential threat that we couldn't even consider that. So this idea that self-love sometimes feels dangerous, like it would be bad to love these parts of ourselves, this is where that comes from. Because who we really are and what we really aren't, the two things that got us rejected in our infancies and in our childhoods, are going to feel like existential threats to us, even as adults now. Even when we can logic our way into like, I could be an extrovert, that's fine. It's still, your nervous system is still going to be like, no, you can't, and no, you won't. And you're going to have people around you that reinforce that, and you're going to have all of these experiences that reinforce it. And to actually break through and see that you can be an extrovert and you can be rejected And you can lose love, and you cannot be accepted, and you can be totally not what anyone wants you to be and still be safe and okay, takes so much time to reprogram in your nervous system. To get to a point where you actually feel safe about being an extrovert is going to require being an extrovert over and over and over again in your shadowed way and loving it. Loving it anyways, getting curious about it anyways, facing the consequences and seeing that you survive anyways, learning how to meet your needs anyways, seeing that people reject you and you can still have food and you can still have shelter and you can still have water, and over again proving to your nervous system that you can be an extrovert, you can get rejected, and that you don't die. And that you're going to have to show that to yourself over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Reprogramming the nervous system is very challenging because, again, it's going to feel and look and sound to you like to be an extrovert is going to make you die. And you're going to have all these reasons. It's going to get me fired. It's going to get me not having my friends. My family will leave me, and then I won't be able to survive. It's going to feel totally logical to you that you can't be this way. It's also going to feel totally logical to you that you have to be these other ways. So when you're trying really hard to do this career or have this body type or have these kinds of relationships or whatever kind of life you're trying to make for yourself that you constantly sabotage, it could be that, again, that is just not authentic to you. You're never going to want to do that. That's not who you are. But in your mind, it's going to be a massive failure every time you can't. You're going to think, no, there's definitely something wrong with me that I couldn't do this career. There's definitely something wrong with me that I can't make this type of relationship work. There's definitely something wrong with me that I can't make this type of lifestyle work. Because this is the way it has to be. This is what success is. And again, your mind is going to filter out anyone who's living alternatively to your programming, who would prove that you could live another way and be okay. Your mind's going to filter that out. It's going to come up with some reason why it's okay for them but not okay for you, why it's possible for them but not possible for you. And you're going to have this continual shame over and over and over again that you can't do this life that you've been trained you have to do, that you don't even know you've been trained you have to do. It's going to be so obvious to you that, like, no, I'm going to have to do this. This is my only option. And so every time I fail at it, it's proof that I suck. It's proof that I should hate myself. It's proof that I am not good. And it's just going to be over and over and over again, until we learn to love these parts. Until we learn to say, okay, well, that's just not who I am. And then, oh my God, what do I do instead? If that's not who I am, if my conditioning isn't correct, if I could be this way that I actually am, what does that even mean? And who am I going to lose? And what am I going to lose? And now I have to figure it out on my own, because the template, because this is the other thing, right? Our conditioning is a template. Our conditioning gives us a feeling of security and well, at least I know what I'm supposed to be doing. At least I know who I'm supposed to be becoming. So I can do all my self-help work and all my self-development work and all my self-improvement work and all my, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know what the path is, I just suck at it. Instead of, maybe that's not the path. Like, maybe literally this isn't the path at all. And now I have to figure it out on my own, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to be, what life is going to look like for me. And then the big part about that is it's going to be messy, right? So then you starting to actually go away from your conditioning, away from normal, that everyone around you, because again, you would have developed relationships with people who your normal was their normal, and you're all attracted to each other because homeostasis, all the rules, and everyone's suffering to a degree, everyone's coping, everyone's scapegoating, everyone's numbing, everyone's doing their thing. And you're going to be like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to try to figure out who I really am so that I can live a life that feels good for me. And what's going to happen at first is you're going to stop numbing and coping and self-sabotaging and looking at your behaviors and doing all these things to figure out what you really want and figure out who you really are and what is true for you and what isn't. And that's not going to be a straight line to this awesome life that you're living that everyone looks at you and goes, oh, it was great that you took the risk to be rejected, that you took the risk to be different, that you left the culture and the conditioning and you figured it out and it's awesome. It's not going to be like that. You're going to stop doing what everyone else is doing. You're going to start questioning what everyone else is like. You're going to go and start being different. And that's going to be messy. You're going to have no idea what you're doing. Your emotions are going to come up. Your feelings are going to come up. You're not going to be able to numb and cope and sabotage the way you used to. You're not going to be able to get rid of the feelings. All of your immature shadows are going to come up. You're going to be lost and confused and have multiple dark nights of the soul, and it's going to be very confusing and scary. And everyone's going to look at you and be like, see, why would you do that? Why would you leave the program? Why would you leave conditioning? You're clearly insane. Come back to us. What you're doing isn't better. Right? You still need to binge. You still need to drink. You still need to do all these things. And you're just miserable all the time. You're not getting the benefits of conditioning, of the program. There's going to be that phase where you don't know what you're doing and you don't know where you're going and you don't know how to trust yourself and you don't know how to figure out what real reality is versus consensus reality. You don't know how to figure out what you actually want to do if that program wasn't it. And it's completely confusing and you wander through the wilderness. That's why all awakening allegories have the wilderness part. Because that's really what it's like. And everyone's going to think you're nuts. Right? You're going to get rejected. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your people. You're not going to find the people that resonate with you right away because you don't know who you are. You're going to go out on your own and you're going to mess up and you're not going to know and you're not going to have clarity and it's going to seem very much like maybe you should go back and maybe they were right. And like I say, we're going to hold on to the program. We're going to hold on to that inner critic, who that inner critic is telling us we can be and who we can't be, because that's homeostasis, that's security, and that at least makes us feel like we know what we should be doing to find it. We at least have a reason when life sucks and when it's hard and when we feel bad, we know why. Because we're not doing the right thing. We just couldn't get ourselves to do the right thing. But don't worry, because I have my solution. I just have to get myself to be like that. Or I have to stop myself from being like that. I just have to get rid of my coping mechanism, get rid of my scapegoat, get rid of my self-sabotage. This, when you really do this, you will always find that you don't just get rid of a self-sabotaging or a coping mechanism or a scapegoat. You figure out what part of yourself you were not being or what part of yourself you were coping with that you're trying to be that you aren't. And that scapegoat self-sabotage coping mechanism is helping you do. And then you become who you really are. And then you lose everything and it's all very confusing. And you have to figure out a whole new life for yourself. And you have to do it by yourself because everyone's going to think you're crazy. And then you become that new person and you have reprogrammed your nervous system through repetition of showing yourself over and over and over again that you can survive even though you're getting rejected, that you can figure it out even though people don't like you, that there are different people out there who have different ideas and they do accept you and that you can survive and you can be this way and it is okay. Over and over and over and over and over and over again until you don't need that thing anymore. You don't get rid of a coping mechanism. You figure out a way of life that actually works for who you really are, so you don't need to cope anymore. And that's a long process. Okay? So this is what the inner critic really is. And this is why it feels dangerous to love ourselves. Because if we were to really actually love these parts of ourselves that we're so deeply conditioned to hate, it would mean, okay, well then that means that my blueprint for who and what I have to be and what life is supposed to be is wrong. And then I'm going to be rejected and I have to figure it out on my own. So most of us will spend the rest of our lives just hating ourselves because that's easier in the short term, because that's the answer in the short term. I just know what part of me is wrong, I know what's bad, and I know what I'm supposed to be. And it is very clear that this part of me is just messing everything up, and I just need to fix it. And spirituality and self-help and self-improvement and Joe Dispenza and all of these people will just rush right in there and be like, you're right. And here are all the tools to how to fix that part of yourself. Right? Because our entire spirituality right now is built on this idea that society has it figured out. We're supposed to be able to be wealthy, abundant, 2.5 kids, relationship, normal job to some degree, but helpful. And if you can't do that, if that's not your lifestyle, there's something wrong with you. And so here are all these tools to help you figure that out. Instead of maybe that life doesn't work for you. Maybe that's not at all how you're going to live your life. Maybe that kind of way of relating is not the way that you relate. Maybe that kind of work structure is not your work structure. Maybe those are not the things you're interested in. Maybe you don't even want to live where you were born. Maybe you don't want to live where you are. Maybe a different culture works for you. Like, there's so much variety in life. And yet we're still being told that, like, this cookie cutter, this is what success is. And if you don't fit in that, and you're coping and you're self-sabotaging and you're numbing and you're in pain, we can fix you so that you can be good at this. It's still the same shit over and over. You are still supposed to become this, whatever this is. And like I said, spirituality is no better than mainstream media telling you who you're supposed to be. Like Kim Kardashian and Deepak Chopra are basically saying the same thing to you. Neither of them are saying what is actually beneficial for you. What do you actually value as a human being? Because this Western civilization culture, capitalism, it doesn't work for most of us. And none of us are questioning it. We're all just continually questioning ourselves. Okay, so I got a question. So we hate the authentic parts of ourselves that got us rejected. Can we also hate the parts of ourselves that we are not? Yes, exactly. I think I've covered that, right? We hate the parts of ourselves when we can't do the job, when we can't do the relationship, when we can't do the whatever. We hate those parts of ourselves and we continually think that we're a failure instead of being able to recognize that, no, I can't do it because that's not who I am. That's not authentic to me. It's not a failure, right? Like, I spectacularly failed at all of my conditioning. Like, I spectacularly failed at everything I was conditioned I was supposed to be. I think that was part of the reason that actually helped me get to where I am now. That there was no compromise. There was no middle ground for me, right? I was born into a small town in Alberta, into Christianity, into capitalism, into the regular education system, in this body with this mind, and everything about me. There was like not one thing about me that fit into the mold. So literally, I think my two options were either I was going to literally kill myself or die in that environment, or I was going to figure something else out. The reason that I can speak to you about this with such conviction is because I've been through it. I have gone through that wilderness. I left and had no fucking idea what I was doing. And everybody thought I was nuts. And it looked nuts for a very long time. It was absolutely out of control for a very long time. It was a lot of trying things and failing and having no idea what I was doing and just having to continually return to, if this is who and what I am, I'm gonna have to figure out a way. And I have now, many years later, but it required so much having to love these parts of myself that were an existential threat to me. And having to say, okay, what? I'm an adult now. So even if I get totally rejected, even if I get left behind, even if I die, I have to do it. I have to try. Because I can't be this person. I cannot live this life. I can't be a Christian. I just couldn't do it. I could not live that life. I couldn't have the husband, the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, the maybe part-time like social worker or nurse job. Like I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. I couldn't eat a normal diet so that people don't feel weird about me. Physically, it was impossible. I couldn't be nice and polite, right? I literally have Asperger's syndrome. I say the truth as I see it. And all of these parts of myself were absolutely dangerous to me. They got me rejected. And all the things that I couldn't do, right? Like especially the things that I couldn't do. The person I couldn't be. That I kept sabotaging my relationships. I kept sabotaging my education. I would sabotage myself in these jobs over and over and over again. And there was a time when I finally just said, okay, why am I doing this? And it was like, yeah, because I don't want to. I don't want to be a yoga teacher. I don't want to be a chef. I'm sabotaging myself because this isn't who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't necessarily know who I am. But I know that this isn't it. And there was a long time of just shedding the things that I wasn't. Okay? So that is what we need to understand about what the inner critic is. The inner critic is the part of you that's trying to get you to be the thing you're supposed to be and not be the thing you're not supposed to be, so that you will be accepted based on your conditioning, which will have been reinforced based on who you've been attracted to because of homeostasis for your whole entire adult life. You're going to have all these stories and all these reasons why if you were to be this true part of yourself, or if you were to not be this, you'll die, you'll fail, you'll lose everyone, you'll lose everything. And you might. You might lose everyone. You might lose your entire group of friends and no one will understand you and you will be judged. And you won't know what you're going to do instead for a period of time. And that's true, right? The inner critic is helping you hold on to the program that at least gives you a program. Because without it, you're going to have to totally figure it out on your own. And most of us were never given those tools. Right? And that's why I teach the emotional mastery. That's why I teach all of this stuff. It's hard, and it's confusing, and it's complicated, and it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of doing it, and seeing what happens, and failing, and trying, and doing it, and seeing what happens, and your nervous system freaking out, and your body freaking out, and everything inside of you being like, no, 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 you can't do this, you can't be this, you can't go there. And doing it anyways, and seeing that you don't die, and then seeing that you had all these stories in your head about how it went, that didn't actually happen. It's a whole big thing. So that's why we find it so difficult to love ourselves sometimes, and to say something nice, or to assume good things about these parts of ourselves, because they were an existential threat, and then they're an existential threat to the program that at least gives us homeostasis and security and a feeling that we know what is right and we know what we're doing. Okay? Second thing, last thing, this self-love journey can also trigger an abandonment wound. This dovetails nicely into this, in that it is very common for us to not want to love parts of ourselves, to not want to be nice to ourselves, to not want to validate ourselves and love ourselves and soothe ourselves and care for ourselves, because we didn't receive the nourishment and the loving and the soothing that we needed in our childhoods from the external world when we actually needed it. So now, when we're in our adulthood and throughout our childhood, it could be that loving ourselves and supporting ourselves and trying to be there for ourselves is triggering these memories of being abandoned in our childhoods when we weren't ready to be abandoned. Okay, so like if you were really celebrated and praised for being the good kid, you were the good one, you were the non-problem child in your family. But that meant that you didn't get back rubs and you didn't get played with and you didn't get attention. You were not getting negative attention, but you weren't getting positive attention. Now, you being good, you being solid, you being in a good place might read to your nervous system, I'm completely abandoned and alone. There are many, 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 many reasons why we might resist loving and nourishing and supporting ourselves if in our childhoods, again, we weren't loved and nourished and supported enough. And if we were put in positions where we had to self-soothe before we were actually mentally and emotionally ready to self-soothe, so we weren't actually capable of self-soothing, now in our adulthoods, having to self-soothe can trigger this feeling of being like a little baby or a little small child who's crying and crying and crying and nobody's coming for me. And that's what it feels like to your nervous system to try to love yourself. It can, so right, the self-love feeling dangerous and the approving of ourselves feeling dangerous comes from either I'm going to love this part of myself and then everyone's going to go away because it goes against my conditioning. I'm going to accept this part of myself and I'm going to be completely abandoned. And if I'm good, if I'm quiet, if I don't have problems, if I'm soothing myself, if I'm loving myself, if I'm nourishing myself, that means I'm alone. People only pay attention to me when I have a big problem. I was only loved and I was only nurtured and I was only given attention when I was struggling, when I was sick, when I was acting out, when I was coping and numbing and sabotaging as a child in those ways. That eventually became my adult coping mechanisms. And the reasons people have to pay attention to me now are when I'm struggling, when I'm down, when I'm suffering. So we sabotage wanting to actually get to a place of loving ourselves or feeling good or feeling capable, because to us, being capable or being good or being strong to our nervous systems means abandonment. We're going to be totally alone. And we can get to this place where we feel like self-love, and this process of self-love is us trying to get to a place where we're completely independent. And that being an adult means we never need attention, we never need love, we never need support, we never need external advice, we never need help. We just become these perfect autonotrons who fully meet our own needs all the time. And that we will sabotage over and over and over again. Because the truth is, that is not what self-love is. No human ever is ever going to become fully independent. Being an adult doesn't mean you never need a hug, or you never need to talk it out with somebody, or you never need to consult with an expert who knows more than you on something. Being an adult and knowing how to meet your own needs doesn't mean you know how to meet your own needs at all times. Like, you are going to build your own house, you are going to get your own water, you are going to run your own electricity. None of that. It means you know how to identify, okay, right now I'm feeling like I need a hug, so can I ask for that? You know how to identify, I need some alone time. I need to talk it out with somebody. I need some advice in this area of my life that I don't know about. Right? When we're becoming aware of our own needs and how to meet our own needs, we become people who can ask for what we need and have consensual adult relationships instead of what most of us have, which is unintentionally manipulative codependencies, where we're all trying to read each other and we're all trying to get love and get our needs met through being what we think other people want us to be, right? Like, if I am this way for you, you do this thing for me, and that makes me feel safe, and then we're in this constant non-dialogue, assuming I'm trying to be this for you, you're trying to be this for me, and then you provide this for me, and then I provide this for you, and it's all this subconscious, unconscious manipulation that's happening, instead of us fully being able to embody who we are and what we need and what we're looking for and what would make us feel good right now, and being able to communicate that clearly, and like I say, have consensual relation. So that last bit is that some of us might not want to love ourselves and might have a deep resistance to letting go of our coping mechanism and our self-sabotage and the ways that we hurt ourselves. Because to us, without those things, we're abandoned. We're not loved unless we're down. We don't get attention unless we're being like, and same thing with, like, it can be the only reason we know how to say no. The only reason we know how to rest, the only way we know how to take time for ourselves is when we're falling apart, or when we're in our coping mechanism really bad. We're in our self-sabotage. So if we were to let that go, the rest of the time, we're so in people-pleasing mode, we're so in service mode, we're so in good person mode, we're trying to have no needs, we're trying to be perfectly there for everyone else, and we're trying to be perfectly perfect. No emotions, no needs. So we're always going to sabotage, we're always going to cope, we're always going to numb, because we can't actually live that way. We don't know how to be a real human with just needs, who sometimes can give and sometimes needs, who can sometimes say yes and can sometimes say no, who can ask for attention when we need attention. We're in this black and white. I have to be either a completely independent adult, and that's way too scary, so I'd rather stay in my coping, my numbing, my self-sabotage, my needs, where I need other people, because otherwise they're going to abandon me, and then I'm going to be alone forever. I don't want to be good, because if I'm good, I can't say no. If I'm good, I'm totally alone. You see? So again, these parts of self, it's not simple. You don't just put a funny hat on your inner critic and say, never mind about that. Figuring out why your inner critic thinks you need to be what you need to be, thinks you can't be what you can't be, is the first step. And then realizing that's a program, and what parts of that program is true and what part of that program is false for you. And then how do you learn to create a life for yourself that actually works for who you really are? It's a lot of work. And then how do you program healthy relationships, right? Where you can say yes sometimes and say no sometimes. Where it's not just, all of your relationships aren't just based on what you do for the other person. Because again, you might have this feeling of like, I can't be down and I can't have needs because everyone rejects me when that happens. And it's like, okay, the truth is not all people are like that. But it might be that all people that you relate to are like that, because those were the people that you're attracted to, because those are the people that remind you of your caregivers, Those are the people your nervous system are comfortable with. That's homeostasis. Doing something new is going to be deeply uncomfortable. It's going to feel like death. And that's, again, when we start to love these parts of ourselves that have been inner critic our whole lives, it's going to feel like an existential threat. All of your stories and all of your shame and all of your guilt and all of the, but if you do this, it's going to be the worst thing you could possibly do. And here's all the reasons why are going to come up. Your physical body is going to rebel from that. You're going to feel like you're going to be totally alone. And there's, I think, a part of us that we might have to face being alone and not having the people around us that we want to have and not being understood and having that wilderness experience and learning to love ourselves anyways and seeing that we can be okay, even if these people who seem like everyone to us in this moment reject us. Because again, you're gonna start to see that your perception of everyone, this is what everyone thinks. It's not true. It's just that's what your brain has filtered, because that's what's homeostasis to you. You've been attracted to those people, those algorithms. Your mind is the original algorithm. You filter out anything that's not in alignment with what is already your programming. So it seems to you like this is the only way to be. And it has to be this way. And if you were to be something different, it's bad. And look, I have all this evidence, right? When I let myself be my real self, it's objectively harmful. And I objectively get rejected. Well, yeah, shadow. What do these parts of yourself actually need? They're immature right now. They're not expressing as their light. You're coping, you're numbing, you're self-sabotage. Those aren't bad parts of you. They're immature parts of you. They're parts of you that are trying to get your needs met the only way they know how. They're parts of you that are trying to fit into a society you're never going to fit into. So it's going to feel dangerous to love these parts. And your nervous system is not going to be happy about it. And you're going to feel like you're going to lose everyone, and you might. But there's a whole other big world out there. I can tell you from personal experience. I figured out a whole different way of life that looks nothing like the way that I was born or raised with. I had no idea that most of these things even existed. And I figured it out just following what I could and couldn't do. And I did lose everyone. And I did lose everything. And I did have to go by myself. A lot. And I did have critics. And I did not have a good reason sometimes. Right? When people were like, you're still like really tense and not healthy and all these things. Why are you doing this? You're clearly wrong. You're clearly not getting it right. It was the journey though. I just had to keep following it. Okay? So that's what the inner critic is actually trying to do. It's just trying to get you to align with your conditioning. And the degree to which your conditioning is out of sync with who you really are is the degree to which you're going to be in pain. And it's going to feel dangerous, and it's going to feel not safe. And the degree to which you weren't loved and nourished and soothed when you needed to be is going to be the degree to which your nervous system rebels from self-soothing and self-love. And so sometimes we need a therapist, and sometimes we need a friend, and sometimes we do need someone to help us regulate before we can start to regulate ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? But having to figure out who you really are outside of your conditioning is not easy. And that's why I make a million videos. And I have my mystery school. And I have all these things. Because it's hard. But you can do it. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave them. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. And I do believe there is a way for you to be yourself in this life. It just might take a lot of trial and error and feeling like you're going to die, trying things that are outside of what you know, and not knowing. It's going to be a lot of not knowing and a lot of uncomfortable, but it's possible. It's totally possible. There's nothing wrong with you. The parts of you that don't fit conditioning, there is a way. You can find it. I believe that you can find it. But it's going to start with accepting these parts, that they're not bad. And that's hard and that's scary. So I see you. It's not your fault. And so don't pressure yourself. It's hard. You don't just wake up one day and decide you're going to love these parts of yourself that have been an existential threat to you your entire life. Okay? Go slow. Be gentle. Just a little bit every day. Start with curiosity. Don't even try to love them. Just curious. What if this part of me isn't terrible? Just what if? What if this part of me actually isn't bad? It's just immature or has a need or just doesn't fit. What if that? We just start with, so is there something we can do before trying to love these parts? Yes. Curiosity. What if this isn't bad? Just start to open that door. Okay? All right. Have a fabulous rest of your day, night, weekend, and I'll see you next week for next week's video.